Yeah.
All right, it's 7:04. We got a few more people. So, all right, welcome. It's November 21st to be exact. Welcome to the Greater Cleveland chapter of Wild Ones, our monthly chapter meeting. Just as a reminder, our mission here is to promote native landscapes through education, advocacy, and collaborative action. So, since it is November, we usually ask, what's blooming in your yard? But
I
that's
have
not
a
really happening
primrose.
right now. So, we had the
I-
idea of asking the group, how do you leave your leaves? So I'll go first. I still have turf grass in my yard. So we clean up the leaves off of all the turf grass and we just push them to the beds. I have a really big bed in the back, and a big spruce tree that most of it in the backyard goes there. And anything in the front either goes in the bed or goes out to the curb. I'm in Stowe, and Stowe picks up leaves. They've done one pickup already. I thought they were supposed to do our second one this week, but alas, the leaves are still there. But Stowe is when they pick up the leaves, they put them all on a city property and mulch them, and they actually give them out as whatever it decomposes to. For the residents later on once they're all mushy and wonderful for your soil. So it's a nice recyclable program. So we leave some, we pile some. What about anybody else?
Well, I'm leaving a lot this year. I never used to. So I'm pushing them into my beds as well. And I'm going to tell you still what's blooming yet. Sawtooth
Oh,
sunflower, spiderwort, and a gray conehead. Yes, yes.
you
Wow.
have a spiderwort that's blooming?
It's been blooming all summer. Yes, I know it.
What
I
kind of
would,
magic dust did you put on your new gardens?
you know, since I'm so new to this, what, like 2 years, 3 years, but I think I may have a magic touch or something because I have a lot going on in the
You
yard.
have like a
Sure.
secret elf in your backyard.
That's
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah. Anybody else?
I have a soft landings area that I pull all the leaves to. That's where I do all my spring ephemerals. And it's like a big circle with trees all around it. And I've been pushing all the leaves on there to overwinter the wildflowers. But I had a primrose bloom the other day. So it's a little mixed up.
That's funny.
It
Yeah,
it had it has been warm,
I
you
know. Yeah,
know, so they're rightfully confused, but
right.
all right.
Janice, one quick point. Sorry to interrupt.
That's
I
okay.
was just looking at the email to join, and I see two different passcodes to get into this meeting. I was doing the bottom one and getting locked out. Um,
Oh,
there's an exclamation point in the top one and not in the bottom one, and I think the exclamation point is right. So I'm wondering if others might be getting locked out, and maybe one of us should send a quick email out to the listserv to say which is the right one.
yeah, I wonder how that happened because I just copied it straight from
It happens.
obviously human error.
Um, I can try to send an email out.
Okay. Can you check to see what's on our website too? Or Facebook? I'm wondering,
Yes, I can.
maybe somebody. Okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so we have Chris Davis with us today, who's going to talk about mussels to creeks. We're gonna give our, well, I guess it's not really election updates, but it's our 2025 Board of Directors and Officers update. Chapter updates, past and upcoming events and activities, And then I thought I'd throw in, if we have time to discuss, because it's November 21st, what native plant books are on your holiday wish list. Or it could be sustainability or ecology or just cool book that might be related to native plants. So if you haven't thought of anything, start thinking so we can chat about it at the end. All right. Sherry, do you want to introduce Chris?
Yes. So again, thank you, Chris, for speaking tonight. So Chris Davis is a plant ecologist with the Cuyahoga Valley National Park. He was born and raised in Akron, Ohio, before moving to California to study biology at, is it Occidental College in Los Angeles, followed by a graduate program at San Diego State University. Chris has worked as a biologist with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and the National Park Service. He currently works as the plant ecologist at Cuyahoga Valley National Park, where his main responsibilities include managing invasive plants, reforesting disturbed sites, and restoring streams and rivers.
Okay.
All right, I'll stop sharing and you should be able to.
And
Let
I
me know.
will try. And then like you know how it goes, so I'll probably be off screen. So if there's a mistake or something, let me know. Let's see how this goes.
Oh, there it is.
Okay, does it seem to be working?
Yes.
All right.
There it is.
So I'm just going to jump into it. Sherry had said like to try and keep this, I think, to like half an hour-ish. So that's kind of my goal. Hopefully that works out.
That should
So
be great.
first, I didn't know, who was going to be here or who knows about the park or whatever. So this first slide is just a quick introduction. Hopefully you can see on your screen in the center of the kind of all those squiggly blue lines is a little green blob. That is Cuyahoga Valley National Park, located pretty much centrally between Akron and Cleveland. The park boundary covers about 33,000 acres. We don't own all that property. A lot of it actually is still private. A lot of it's owned by Cleveland Metro Parks, Summit Metro Parks, and some other local organizations. But we are definitely the dominant landowner, particularly along the Cuyahoga River. And some of our like major habitats here, by far the dominant habitat at the park is forest, with oak, hickory, and then beech maple forest being the predominant, habitat types here. We also have tons of wetlands. Obviously, the Cuyahoga River goes through the middle of the park. So we have a lot of diversity, but mostly forest. So the Cuyahoga River, probably everybody on this call has some idea about the background, kind of a disaster. Like the Cuyahoga River burned many, many times, not just in 1969. That's the most famous event, but it burned, almost a dozen times before that over many years. People think this was kind of like, a lot of people, at least, some anomaly, but this was going on all over the country. Like virtually all the major rivers and all the major cities were devastatingly polluted and catching on fire. And it wasn't just the rivers, it was the coastline too. The same time that the Cuyahoga River was burning in 1969, almost the same time. Also, it's the bay out in Santa Barbara, California. I don't know if anybody's been to Santa Barbara. Super beautiful, very wealthy city. But back in the day, that also super polluted. That bay was burning. So this was kind of a common occurrence throughout the country. And literally at the time, some parts of the Cuyahoga River, there was no life. There was no oxygen. It was so polluted, even the most like basic of life forms could not survive there except for maybe some bacteria. So that was then. This is now, 50 years later or so from the time of the last fire on the river. You can see on the pictures on the left, water quality way, 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 way much improved. Water clarity very improved. We have some big fish back in the river. I'm going to talk about the fish and the water and this weird Davy Jones locker type thing on the bottom of the screen a little later. So I'm just going to skip over. But things are drastically different now than they were even as recently as the 1970s. So the current status, this is a picture basically of a representative photo of the Cuyahoga River in the park. So again, way improved over the historic conditions, over the last couple 100 years, but also not great. You can see in this picture that vertical eroding bank. There are trees falling in, young trees. There aren't a lot of trees along the bank in most of the park. Historically, way back, there would have been huge giant trees growing on those banks. There would have been a little, floodplain shelf. It wouldn't have been this eroding cut bank. I've heard from even people who are very educated about rivers and water quality, they're like, kind of like, oh, well, rivers just do their thing. And, they do to an extent, but there's also like just some physical laws that they have to follow. And so rivers around the whole world, again, they don't look the same. And at any given time, they're always changing, but there are some general, again, they're almost laws about how the rivers meander and shape and how long they should be based on slopes and all that kind of stuff. So again, they're not magical and they still are affected by what humans are doing. Again, current status, we did a bank survey a few years ago, and we found that about a third of the bank, based on this, 36% of the bank, is dominated by an invasive plant called Japanese knotweed. That is the photo in the bottom right-hand corner with that little orange kayaker going in front of it. Japanese knotweed, super invasive. It's hard for anything native to grow up under that like dense canopy. We also have almost a third of the park is dominated by these, almost vertical eroding cut banks. Sometimes they're short, sometimes they're a few feet, like in that last picture. Sometimes they're monstrous. Sometimes they're 10, 20 feet tall, just a cut bank eroding into the river. And the top right-hand photo shows like a really, and this is not uncommon at the park, where like there's some big kind of old trees that are growing right down to the river's edge. They're holding the bank in place. Right next to them is an unvegetated section of the bank. And you can see the river just cutting back into that. So we have this like kind of mosaic along the whole length of the 26 miles in the park boundaries, where it goes from occasionally a pretty nice little like native forested bank to just this crazy invasive, and also then this crazy cut bank situation. So what's contributed to some of these problems we continue to have? One of the first, maybe the biggest, development. These series of photos in these two slides, or images in these slides, just show how development has changed over time. You can see in the left-hand image how around the park, so this is basically focusing on the park, it's went from basically a mosaic of undeveloped forest and farmland back in the 50s to almost completely developed today. The more development there is, the more impervious surface there is. Rain falls, it hits the asphalt or whatever the impervious thing is, and it just runs off. There's no absorption, there's no like groundwater, rescue of this kind of stormwater. Just goes into the creeks, into the pipes, and then into the Cuyahoga River. Interestingly, I think on the right-hand one, this is showing how land use changed between 1948 and 2005 in Cuyahoga County. The big red blob at the top is basically Cleveland. But the interesting thing is the population between those two times in the county hardly changed. It was in both years about 1.4 million. It's just how and where people are living. So we've moved out of these dense urban areas into this sprawling, suburban development. And so you can see again, going from the top in 1948 in Cuyahoga County, surrounded by really farmland. Today, it's almost all developed. So again, what does that do? The more rain we get, the more it just runs off immediately into our rivers and creeks. Not good for stormwater retainment. Oh, how did that happen? Hold on. Something crazy is happening here. Okay. I'm almost there. I hit the wrong button. So another factor that's causing some issues today is increased precipitation. So we looked at, with the Army Corps of Engineers, at some of the rain gauges in Northeast Ohio, and you can see some of them go back, 80 years down at Cleveland Hopkins Airport. That's been there a long time. Chardon. So we have about 80 years worth of data. And in general, you can see the trend over that 60 to 80 years, slightly increasing year to year. So overall, we increase our precipitation by about an inch every 10 years. And so over 6 or 8 years, compared to back in the 40s and 50s, we're getting 6 to 8 more inches of rain per year in this area. It's falling on more impervious surface. So that's a bad combination. It's kind of a double whammy. More rain, more asphalt, more runoff directly into rivers and creeks. So, those rivers and creeks, they're not designed to hold and carry all that much water in that short of a time. So this is causing some of that bank erosion you saw in some of those photos. Another issue, particularly with the Cuyahoga River, some people think of it as still pretty curvy and, meanders a lot. And there's this perception that that's kind of natural. And to some extent it is in some areas. But this is just one example of several I could show of where in 1966, in the late 60s, they rebuilt a bridge that crosses the Cuyahoga River on the border of Brecksville, the city of Brecksville, and Sagamore Township, and Sagamore Hills. And when they did that, they cut off about 1,800 feet of river for this one project. And they also straightened the river under the bridge. So this is just one example of several where we've cut off thousands of feet of river length. And what does that do when you have the same start and end elevations, but you make the distance between those 2 points shorter? It makes the slope steeper. So the water is running faster. So again, we have more rain, it's hitting more impervious surface, and it's traveling a shorter distance between 2 points, which means more and more erosion. And then hopefully, I think this is one of the final kind of contributing factors that I'm going to talk about today, is something called aggradation. We hear a lot about degradation, how things are getting, kind of degraded, which means they're getting lower and lower in quality. Well, this is aggradation. Well, actually, the floodplain along the Cuyahoga River has grown. It's risen over sometimes a very short periods of times, even decades, by feet, by several feet to 6 to 10 feet. And these photos on here, the top left one is showing a shovel where we did a creek restoration. You can see that little tree in the back. Just in the past couple of decades, and since I've been at this park, that floodplain has grown several feet around that tree. In the top right-hand corner, you can see a tree that's falling on its side. There's a shovel on top of that tree. Shovels are, I don't know, it's maybe 5 feet, something like that. But you can see where that tree started to grow 60 years ago or so. And by the time it fell, when we were doing this creek restoration project, the floodplain had risen about 6 feet around that tree. So the river is not getting incised, it's not cutting into the floodplain. Actually, the floodplain is growing up along the river. And the bottom, this one's maybe hard to see on your screens, the bottom left picture shows a hole. We were doing some archaeology right adjacent to a road in the floodplain, Stanford Road, and you can see some little plastic about 2 feet down in that hole, where this is just modern plastic. I don't remember if that was a fork or what it was, but that was buried there. It's now buried feet under what used to be the floodplain, only, again, a few decades ago. So there's still a lot of issues going on with the river. Definitely way, 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 way better than it was back in the 60s and 70s. Still issues. There's this certain phenomenon that's called the shifting baseline syndrome. And it was first kind of started to talk about in the scientific community back in the 70s, when some scientists asked some kids in Houston just what they thought about air quality. It was kind of a sociological study. And all the kids thought that air quality there, not all, but a lot of the kids, it was just fine. It's what they were used to. But kind of empirically, scientifically, air quality in Houston at that time was horrendous. But that's what the kids knew. So they thought it was okay. Again, as the baseline shifted, the kids didn't know what it used to be back, like in the old days. They just know what they grew up with. And even people who really think they understand the environment in some cases don't really realize that they're being tricked by this shifting baseline syndrome. And so on the screen are 2 photos taken, you can see maybe hopefully by basically the same operation in Florida. Gulf Stream, the one on the left in 1957, that was the original Gulf Stream when this yachting, fishing operation was started. The one on the right is Gulf Stream 3. So that's 2 generations later. But you can see back in the 50s, people were catching these huge fish in this exact same area. Today, these guys on the right, they're still catching, like for them, for me, big fish, and they're catching a lot of them, but there's no comparison. So people today are like, hey, fishing is great in that area. We catch a lot of fish. But when you actually look at what people were catching, a generation or two ago, the ones they were catching then would be eating. These are bait fish that we're catching today. But we don't really realize it because this is what we grew up with. And so an example of this, even today, amongst some of our really people who really understand the environment well, is in the top right-hand or left-hand photo, and the bottom elongated photo, those are photos of an area that were categorized by Ohio EPA as Category 3, or highest quality wetlands in Ohio, get this designation. And these are areas dominated by non-native invasive plants. You can see that creek is pretty destroyed. There are a few trees, but not a lot. So even people who really know about wetlands are thinking these very degraded systems are top wetlands in the state. The top right-hand photo is a photo of where there used to be a dam. We removed that dam, and now it's a free-flowing river. Immediately, the water quality improved. So even though you can see a railroad track on the far side, there's riprap all along that bank. There's still a concrete abutment. We consider this exceptional warm water habitat today because we have good fish in there and the water quality is pretty good. So what are some of the things we're doing at Cuyahoga Valley? So we're doing our best to try and restore the river. Trying to, when I say restoration, I don't mean to put it back to a perfect condition from the past that we think was, optimal. I'm just talking about really making things better, trying to improve water quality, trying to improve habitat and so on in the river. And on one of these projects we started 6 or 8 years ago, we're working with the Army Corps of Engineers. We asked them for some suggestions. They gave us a bunch of options, and here's 3 of them. One of them was to make the river a little bit longer in one place. That's the area on the left-hand image on the screen. The central one, there's a little blue squiggly line. That's where they're like, hey, why don't we connect the river to the floodplain better? The floodplain's risen. Let's get the river back up onto the floodplain. The one on the right-hand side, that's where they're like, man, there's so much Japanese knotweed out there. Let's just control invasive plants. So there was a big range of alternatives. We ended up choosing one that was basically to make the river longer. We've cut off so much of the river, it's still causing problems. So let's just add some of that length back. And so that's the image in the background that shows the little green squiggles that we were hoping to add to the river in this certain section shown here, which is basically the center of the park. And then we picked another alternative to reintroduce freshwater mussels. I'm going to talk about both of these a little bit more in a minute. So the purpose of the project to lengthen the river is to reduce erosion. Again, there's more water in the river. It's shorter. It's running faster. That causes erosion. So we wanted to reduce erosion and just basically increase the stability of the river. All rivers move. They're always changing. But again, there's certain, physical constraints that they operate under. And then the final thing, we wanted to just basically improve habitat and habitat diversity along the river at the park. So of those 6 options we originally had, for various reasons, we ended up eliminating 5. We ended up with one alternative to restore a meander, basically at that same area where I showed you a picture earlier, where the river had been cut off back in the late 60s when we rerouted this road and rebuilt a bridge in Brecksville. So the proposal is to restore about 1,250 feet of that meander that used to be there. That's not restoring all the length that was lost at this area, but with the constraints we have today, that's what we could do at this site. So the little blue squiggly, kind of worm-like line, the light blue line, that's where we're going to be recreating a meander there that will lengthen the river. It will decrease erosion and hopefully kind of stabilize some of the problems at that site. So what do we expect to happen there? We're going to spend a lot of time controlling invasives, Japanese knotweed, reed canary grass, so on. We're going to cut back some of the banks, and then we're going to plant a lot of trees after we dig out that new channel. And the kind of inset photo there with my hand on it is a sycamore that we planted about 13 years ago. So some trees grow really fast. We're hoping in 10 or 15 years, this new restored section of the river will be somewhat stable. We'll have large trees growing on the banks, which will definitely improve habitat in that area and slow down erosion. As part of this project too, we're going to be restoring some creeks at a golf course we obtained in 2021, south of Peninsula. And after we got the golf course, we did some studies and we found that about 10,000 linear feet, almost 2 miles of historic creeks had either been buried in pipes or channelized into like super deep ditches. And so we have a lot of opportunity at this golf course to really, really improve conditions. As part of this river project, we will be working to restore at least 3,000 to 5,000 feet of that creek at this site at the golf course. And this is just kind of a diagram of that section we're going to be working on. We're going to be pulling this, again, several thousand feet of creek that currently is buried in a pipe about 6 feet underground. We're going to be bringing it back to the surface. And again, we're going to be reforesting that whole kind of floodplain bench along the creek. Hopefully in a few years, we'll have some of these big trees along the way. And so what we're hoping to get, this is a little bit upstream of where the creek is buried, just before it goes into a pipe, basically looks like these photos. It's a really, really super pretty little sedge meadow with some trees just starting to take hold there. So this is kind of what we're hoping in a few years we'll have downstream of this section. We'll just continue from the upstream area you see in these photos through the restored daylighted section of creek out to the Cuyahoga River. So the other alternative we selected that we're working on with the Army Corps and a lot of other partners is trying to restore freshwater mussels to the Cuyahoga River. We have some archaeological studies from way back that documented that before, white settlers came into this area, the Cuyahoga River was full, like just full of thousands and thousands of dozens of species of freshwater mussels. Today, we have virtually none. Back by the time of the 60s, when the river last caught on fire, there were no mussels in this whole section of the river. So we're looking to see if we can restore mussels. The first step of this project was in 2021. We really just put out some small cages. We anchored them in the river and we put adult mussels in there just to see, will they survive? And sure enough, most of them did. We lost a few of the cages. We lost a few of the mussels. But in general, the adult mussels did pretty well. So it wasn't, so basically we documented and confirmed that the water quality in the river today is good enough to support adult mussels. The next step was to say, okay, adults, they may be bigger, they may be tougher. What about the small little baby juvenile mussels, that are just going to be popping out if we get these, populations going in the river? So in 2022, we looked at juvenile survival. We built these weird concrete kind of beach ball size structures. And we put these small little, juvenile mussels in there to see how they did. And we also found that in general, the juveniles did really well. And they also grew pretty well. So all of this was very promising, saying, okay, the conditions seem good for us to put mussels back in the river. So in 2023, we actually did. We got some adults. We did a study to see where do we think the best place to put them back in would be. And we went to those sites and we tagged some of these adults. We put little some of the tags were just numbers, but there were also little like transponders that would tell us where the mussels were when we went out there with the little, it looks like a metal detector. So we tracked how these mussels did, where they moved. And you can see in the bottom right-hand picture, hopefully, these weird squiggly lines, that was showing where some of these mussels really moved around. So that was 2023. Survival was pretty good. By this year, we really had a hard time finding any of these mussels. The tags fell off. Some of the mussels we found, some of them we definitely found dead. But a lot of them tags are just missing. So we have found a few live ones out there. We know some of them are doing okay. And going into the future, we're going to be trying to put more in, more variety, more diversity, more adults. And so we're working with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and the Army Corps of Engineers. We have funding to do to build one of these propagation trailers where we will be raising our own mussels at the park here, and then we'll be placing them directly into the river. So that's going to be coming in the next year or so. Hopefully, we have the funding right now. And again, we're working with one of the Fish and Wildlife Services fish hatcheries to provide us small ones that we're going to like raise up and put back into the river. So the Brecksville Canal Diversion Dam, that is a dam that you can see in the top right hand or left hand photo, excuse me. We call it sometimes Route 82 Dam because that is Route 82 on that bridge over the river. We removed that dam about 4 or 5 years ago. Took a little while to get it done, but now we have a free-flowing river for the first time within park boundaries. No dams within the park or upstream of the park. The nearest dam at this point is the Gorge Dam, Summit Metro Parks, basically in Cuyahoga Falls area. So we've restored a pretty big stretch of free-flowing river within park boundaries. And again, as soon as we took out that dam, immediately the water quality upstream, even though this was a kind of a short dam, it was only like typically like blocking up 2 to 4 feet of water. Dam was a little taller, but it was affecting hydrology over a mile upstream. So as soon as we took it out, more than a mile of upstream, almost a mile and a half of water quality improved drastically. And we started seeing some cool stuff come in. And so we have been working since then with the U.S. Geological Survey, the Ohio Department of Natural Resources, and several other agencies and organizations to sample fish to see what has happened since we've removed the dam. So these are just some examples of us electroshocking fish in the river at the park. And, you know, it doesn't kill the fish, it stuns them, they float to the surface. We can collect them, we measure them, we see what's there. The photo on the right is showing somebody inserting a small tag into a fish, and then we can track them. We now have a system throughout the whole Great Lakes, including many of the rivers, where we have receivers. So when fish with these tags swim by those receivers, we can track where specific individual fish are and where they're going and where they're coming back to. So since we took out the dam, we've seen some fish that probably have not been in the Cuyahoga River in this part of the park, upstream of that dam, in maybe 200 years. So the top left-hand fish, bigmouth buffalo, that's a super cool, pretty large fish, native fish. Silver red horse, again, another one we're seeing upstream where the dam is. The bottom right-hand photo, that is a small walleye that somebody caught in Peninsula at our Block 29 area, right by the winking lizard. There probably haven't been walleye upstream of that dam, again, perhaps in as long as 200 years or so. So we're seeing cool fish come back into that river pretty much immediately within years of the dam being removed. Bottom left-hand photo, some of you may have heard of round goby. That is actually a non-native invasive fish, really, really, really common now in Lake Erie. So we're also seeing that coming up into the river too. So mostly good, some bad, but again, we removed the dam, unquestionably good effects on fish diversity, habitat diversity, and water quality. And so that's kind of a summary of some of the projects we're working on, some of the history, where we were, where we are now, some of the stuff we have planned in the future. That river restoration project to add in that new meander up near that bridge that was moved in Brecksville. We're hoping to start that next spring. So if things go well, so far so good. We're trying to wrap up all the background permitting stuff we need to do this fall. It's really starting to fall into line. So hopefully we'll be doing that project next spring. We'll continue with reintroducing mussels, and hopefully some of the fish will just continue to improve in the area too. So that's the end of my presentation. If anybody has any questions, I'm going to try to stop sharing now, see how this goes. Hopefully I'm now off the sharing screen. Is that for you,
Yep.
Janice? Okay, cool. So if anybody has any questions or comments or anything, I'm happy to try and address them or just listen to what you have to say.
Chris, I have a question. How many varieties of mussels would there be or do you anticipate reintroducing?
So not we, the park, but archaeologists, again, through like historic studies, looking at some of the old. So they're kind of more common out west. They call them shell middens, or on the coast. I shouldn't say out west, but on the coast where Native Americans ate a ton of shellfish and would make huge piles of the shells. And so we do have some of those also inland, though, too, in the interior of the country. And there was one of those documented in what is now the park. And they had found over, I think it was over 20 different species of mussels back in the day, like, 1,000 years ago, living in the Cuyahoga River. So our initial goal is really just to get any back in there. We're starting to see some indications. Even this year, we might have found one or two like native live mussels in the river on the park stretch. So our goal is to start with some of the most like toughest ones that are kind of more resilient to, turbidity and pollution and stuff, and then go from there. With the goal being with us to maybe try and get to maybe 8 species in the next few years, and then just who knows after that, Sherry. But the first goal to get a couple, 2 or 3 or 4 species in there, then ramp up a little bit when we get the production trailer going, propagation trailer. And then hopefully, years from now, you and I might not be around here seeing what's in the river. I don't know, but hopefully we'll have a program going that's sustainable with a lot more.
And what kind of trees are you planting along the banks? I know you said sycamore. What other trees do you
So
find?
some of the ones that we have been planting most commonly, like kind of in our lowland floodplainy areas at the park, we've done about 200 acres of reforestation so far. We have a few hundred more, 400 acres, like kind of lined up over the next few years. And so the lower ones that we plan along more in the floodplain areas, sycamore, box elder, silver maple, cottonwoods, swamp white oaks. Those are some of the most common ones. Then we've planted walnuts. They do okay in some of those wetter areas, and a variety of other species. But the main big ones are swamp white oak, sycamore, box elder, cottonwood, silver maple.
Okay.
Anything
Do
else?
you,
Yeah, Chris,
you
I have a
have-
question. Go ahead.
go ahead, Diane.
Okay. So I was just curious, maybe you said it and I might have missed it, but why'd you pick mussels as the sort of key plant or I mean,
The key indicator, like the creature.
Sea urchin?
Yeah. Yeah. So the reason we picked mussels, okay, so there's a couple of reasons. First of all, we have this documented studies that there used to be tons of mussels in the river, then to virtually none. So it's just something that should be there. We destroyed those communities. It's kind of, again, just kind of on us, I think, to help bring them back. Okay, so that's one reason. But the other reason, particularly for mussels, is they're filter feeders. So some people think, oh, they can clean the water, and they can't. They can't clean the stuff that was burning back in the 1950s and 60s. That's too much. I mean, again, they're not supernatural. They will die. There's too much pollution. But if the water quality is good, but in some areas a little bit questionable, mussels will help. Like a single mussel can filter 25 to maybe in some states 40 or 50 gallons of water a day. So they're also like good cleaners of the river as long as they can survive in the river. And so we're documented they can survive there today. So again, it's just like they will just help us make things better over time if we can get more in the river. At some point they can do some of the work for us, which is awesome. So there's kind of just this historic, and they're just cool. And they are, I mean, they're just cool. They're so weird. They have this weird life cycle where like the baby mussels, or they call them veligers, they're teeny tiny little like things, microscopic, life stage. They detach themselves to fish gills. And so they're dependent on fish really to survive. And again, so now we have cool fish back in the river. So some of these mussels that need these certain fish, now we have them back. Just bizarre. It's such a bizarre life cycle. So cool creatures, something we should be doing, and plus they're going to help us.
That's cool.
It is. It is
Another
really cool.
another question I have for you. Thank you for that. the sediment, I know that that's a big issue behind the gorge dam because it's going to take a
Yeah.
year to get rid of all the sediment so that
Yeah.
they don't just wash it downstream. Were those issues that you guys had to take into consideration as well?
So the gorge dam is kind of an anomaly. First of all, it's so huge in this area. Other places not. In other places, the gorge dam really, I mean, we think is some big giant thing. Other places, it's not really that big. If you compare that to a lot of dams out west, it's like a little little kid built some little thing in a creek, you know. But so there's so much sediment back to, we didn't really have that issue with the Brecksville Dam, for instance. Um, there was some sediment backed up behind that dam, but it just wasn't so tall, and there's still a lot of like turbidity, I mean not turbidity, yeah, turbidity, like water movement and stuff. So we didn't have that problem. Most of the other dams, like the Monroe Falls dams, even the Cuyahoga Falls dams, they didn't really have that huge issue with contamination because they just weren't so big, and they didn't have the same stuff coming. The Gorge Dam was catching a lot of bad stuff, for better or worse. And so yeah, so we took ours out. We didn't really have to worry that much about that, but that's a huge, giant undertaking just to get that sediment out of there.
Mhm.
Does that answer your question?
It sure does. And then I have
Okay.
one last question,
Sure.
and then
Sure.
I'll stop and I'll let the rest of you talk. Um, did you have to stock any fish, or did they just naturally come back in most cases?
So we did not stock any fish. All those fish came back. The two fish species that are being stocked by the Ohio Department of Natural Resources in the Cuyahoga River, they just started stocking steelhead, which is a non-native fish. And there were never steelhead or rainbow trout in this area, actually. So they're stocking that for a recreational fishery to try and get that stronger in the Cuyahoga River. And then something they just started, and this is like a big partnership project with a bunch of agencies, is stocking lake sturgeon. And that to me is one of the coolest projects that we could be doing. Lake sturgeon, I don't know if any people on this call know about sturgeon. They're an ancient type of fish. They've been around literally for millions and millions of years. Lake sturgeon can grow up to 6 feet or bigger. They can weigh up 100, 200 pounds. And to have something like that back in the Cuyahoga River, that's when we really know that things are changing and that some of that wildness is back. So we just released totally tiny amount, like it was 60 baby sturgeons. They were like this big, you can hold them in your hand. It takes them, decades, 10 or 20 years easy before they'll come back from Lake Erie into the river to reproduce. But going forward in the next few years, like I forget, I think it's 10 years maybe, they're committed to stocking over 1,000. So, this was a small introduction just to get something going. But going forward, we'll be putting a lot in. And then we'll be following them because they have those little tags in them. And whenever they swim by, like most of us, like I wouldn't even know it, there are buoys and stuff all around Lake Erie. They're in the river, they're in the ports, tracking these fish swimming by. And so we'll be able to tell immediately, like, where are those little babies? Are they making out to Lake Erie? Where are they? And then next year when we put in a lot, all of a sudden it'll be like, boom, So yeah, super, super cool project, I think.
That's cool. That's awesome.
That is
Yeah.
cool.
Thank
I
you.
had heard about the sturgeon, and we were all nerding out at work
Yeah.
about it.
It is.
The
It's
other
crazy.
thing, one more thing
Excuse me.
about fish. I know Geauga Parks is doing the brook trout reintroduction at a few of their parks, so that's been exciting too.
Yes.
My question was going to be about plants. So, you were talking about the eradicating the Japanese knotweed that's, all over. I assume, does the park have, I don't know, this, working departments of the national park. Do we have like a crew that's designated for the invasive plant removal?
So we have some regional crews that kind of travel around, and that's what they do. They're called invasive plant management crews, basically, or teams. But so we have them, and they do, so they come here to this park. They go to all the parks. I've worked at different parks. They always have these traveling crews. Um, Here we have like just a crew that I've been able to fund on my own. So the National Park Service isn't funding it. I'm getting funding from outside sources, sometimes government, sometimes not government, sometimes other nonprofits. National Fish and Wildlife Foundation, for instance, they do a lot of super cool grants, particularly, like for pollinators and stuff. Any organization can apply for these grants. You guys can
Yeah.
apply for them.
Yeah.
So I have my own crew that I'm like self-funded here that ranges, it depends on the funding year, but from 2 to 6, people, and
Yeah.
that's their job, to kill invasives and then plant native stuff.
Okay. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Do you do like volunteer invasive pole events?
We do. And so thank you. Yeah, that's what I was just going to mention too. So yes, I'm just going to plug it, is we do like, we have a crew of regular, they're like people who work with me every week. I call them the regular volunteers. They're here and they're mostly retired folks. And they come out twice a week throughout winter, because winters are so wacky, like they can do it. So we have a
Right.
group of 10 to 20, at least twice a week throughout the year. They're out there killing invasive plants. But then beginning in like May and June, we have a whole variety of drop-in things where there's just on the calendar. So like Thursday afternoon, some Saturdays, they're on the park calendar, on our website. Just
Yeah.
anybody can just come here and help us kill invasive plants. We have volunteer events where people can come help us collect native seeds that we grow in our greenhouse. We have drop-in plants to like events to plant trees or wildflowers. So yeah. So we just finished all that, but it'll start up again next spring and it'll go through November, basically.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome.
Yeah.
Thanks, Chris.
I might even send like Sherry, I don't know who the contact is. I'll probably just send it to Sherry, but like a link to and you can maybe spread it if you want, just for a volunteer calendar. It's gonna be
That'd be
empty now.
awesome.
But
Yes, that would be wonderful.
yeah. Yeah, we're always looking for help. No question.
I know a lot of our members like to get out and get their hands dirty, so.
Yeah, it's cool. Yeah. All
Does
right.
anybody else have any questions for Chris or comments?
I have a quick question, and maybe I got here late, so maybe this was addressed, but I was wondering if, or what are the native predators to mussels, or if there are any?
Yeah, that's a good question too. And that's when we get like kind of occasionally, but so mostly like otters would really like mussels, for instance. Muskrats will eat mussels, if they can find them. There aren't any, so they're not doing it. But like where I live on a small lake in Portage Lakes area down south of Akron. And we have they're all non-native mussels, like in the lake where I live, but mostly. But the muskrats love them. They make these little, again, piles, I go out by my dock and, it's like, I don't know, as big as a trash can, where they've dug up all the, these mussels and eaten them. So yeah, so once they're there, they're cool. They're a part of the chain, definitely.
Thank you.
Sure.
That was a good question.
I like your background, by the way. Those lights are like crazy. That's cool.
Thanks.
I know. Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
I have a question. Chris, did you go to Coventry High School?
I did. Did you go there?
Okay.
Did you seriously?
Yes, I did.
I'm totally not joking. It's been like decades, but even when I saw you, when I saw your name, I'm like, is that Diane from Coventry?
Diane
almost
Miller,
asked you-
Coventry High School.
I know.
In
Seriously, I almost asked you,
1982.
but I was like, that's going to be weird. And then you'll be like, what are you, So
Yeah, I
Yeah.
thought right away, I'm like, that's got to be Coventry, Chris. Okay, sorry.
Yeah, it is.
We're having our own separate conversation.
Yeah, no, that's cool. Well, nice to see you again after 40 years or 50 years almost now? 40, I
You don't
guess.
have to
Yeah.
say it specifically if you don't want to.
I know I'm dating myself too, but
Well,
it's
it's
been a
good to
while.
see you again.
Yeah, likewise. Cool.
What a small world. That's fun.
I know, it's wacky.
It's
So I'm kind
awesome.
of running over. I don't want to, I know, and you guys already like,
Oh, it's okay. It's good conversation. So I'd rather, I like having everybody chatting, and excited and asking questions. So, all right.
well, thank you.
Uh,
Thank you for the invite. And I will just say one more quick thing. So
yeah,
Sherry or, whoever, like, if somebody has a question or whatever, feel free to like share my contact information or, whatever. So
for
I'm
sure.
happy to like
Thank you,
follow up too
Chris.
after this. Yeah. Cool organization you guys have going.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Chris.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So we have our board of directors for 2025 from our election results. Here's Snoopy, very excited to tell everyone. So I myself am going to be president for 2025. Jessica Ostomer, who's our president now, is going to be vice president. Diane Davis, who is on here, is going to continue to be our treasurer. We're going to have co-secretaries in 2025, Cassie Hoover and Anya Milgram, who are both pretty active right now with the chapter. Cassie helps out with social media. Anya helps out with membership. And then just our general board members, Shelly Tender. She works with Medina County Parks. We have Ray Stewart, who is our current VP. He owns Webfoot Designs out in Lorain County. And then we have Allison Welsh, who's on the call tonight. She's newer to Wild Ones. We're very excited to have some fresh eyes and fresh ideas through Allison for next year. So we're excited. We're planning. We're getting all the good stuff together to share with you guys for what we did in 2024 and what we're going to do in 2025, hopefully. So be on the lookout for that. Since October, we've had 5 new members. So thank you. I don't see those names on the call tonight, which is fine. All right. We asked this question at the last meeting. We're going to ask it again and send out the survey. But in 2025, we're looking to change the date of the chapter meeting. It's still going to be the 3rd week of the month, but we're thinking of shifting it from Thursday to either Tuesday or Wednesday. We're finding a lot of conflicts with Thursday, so we want to see what works best for our members, what works best for non-members, people of the general public who are coming to watch our chapter meetings. So let us know. You can email us. That QR code will take you to a Google form, and just let us know. Tuesday, Wednesday, it doesn't matter to you. Either one. Our Northeast Ohio Native Habitat Corridor, we have 145 gardens. So that means we're short 5 gardens. Quick math there. From getting 150, it would be awesome if we get 150 before the end of the year. So if you have joined the corridor, make sure to tell your friends if they have native plants in their yard. And just spread the word. It would be great if we could get up to that 150 mark before the new year. So kudos to Erin, who's also on the call tonight, for heading up our corridor program. She's been doing a great job with getting it rolling. And here's the information.
Team effort.
Team effort, yes. Thank you. If you do want to join, if you haven't joined, it's very easy. You can go to our website. You can use this QR code as well. It's free, which is awesome. Our one stipulation is that you have 1 native plant in your yard to help create this corridor. I thought I had one more slide in there, but I didn't. So, you can see this lovely interactive map that's on our website, and you can choose to upload some photos. You can obscure your address a little bit so that way, you know, you just kind of, I live over here kind of, so that way if you don't want, you know, people zooming in on your house, or if you do and you want to say, hey, look at all the cool plants I have, that's wonderful as well. So, but very excited for 145 gardens. We have some, yes, go ahead.
This is not just for private locations either. We could have, and I don't know, maybe you all on the call know, but I don't think we have any place in CVNP on our map yet, do we? So just, you know, throwing that out there, Chris Davis.
That's a good point, Diane. You know, if you work at a school and you have a native plant garden at your school, or a monarch way station, or a pollinator garden, or at your church, or at your community center, they all count and could all go on the corridor map. So that's a really good point. That doesn't have to be your place of residence. It can be, you know, a special garden somewhere. All right, so we have a few, I'm gonna try and run through these quick. A few volunteer opportunities, as we usually do, especially going into the 2025 season. We're kind of having a little bit of changeover with some of our positions. You know, people that are stepping away, or, you know, just other life commitments are happening. So we're kind of looking for people who would like to step into these roles. So assistant volunteer coordinator, assisting in organizing and recruiting and managing volunteers, helps to gather information from new members also, and how they can get involved in volunteering if they show interest. An assistant web chair. This person would assist with maintaining the chapter website. I do not know anything about that, so I can't answer any questions about the web chair. And obviously you know, they would be collaborating with the other officers and board members to make improvements or add new content. You know, as we have new ideas and programs and projects arise, we kind of decide, is this something we want to put on the website, and how, and all that stuff. A garden tour program chair is next. So we planted, I believe, or helped plant 2 community gardens this past year. We have a few more in the docket for 2025. So just kind of someone who can help plan with either an organization or a partner to, oh, I'm reading the wrong one. Okay, hold on. Reverse. Garden tour program chair. I was thinking community garden. Okay, here we go. Garden tour.
But we need
As
that
we
other
know-
one too. We need them both.
The other one
All
is
good.
one as well. I just got excited. Garden tour. We did a bunch of garden tours this past summer, all around Northeast Ohio, Cuyahoga County, Summit County, Lorain, Medina. So we're looking for someone who ideally has experience in putting together a garden tour. I think we got the ball rolling as to how we want to do it this year. So it's just kind of streamlining that and having someone on the back end to organize with those garden tours. Event coordinator. This one's pretty self-explanatory. Help plan, coordinate, and execute chapter events, whether they're in person or virtual, making sure that these events are aligning with our mission and goals. Now, the community garden coordinator, which I had started talking about. So we had helped facilitate and plant 2 community gardens this past year. We have a few more to do next year. So just maintaining contact with those community partners for for gardens that we have already done, but also for new potential gardens. And kind of organizing and working with our volunteer coordinator to get the bodies to either help plant, do a maintenance day, a mulch day, you know, whichever. And then regional coordinators, we are really looking to, you know, focus and make sure that we are hitting all of Northeast Ohio with different events and educational programs in 2025. So with obviously an emphasis on Cuyahoga County, and with so many people in Cuyahoga County, it would be great if we could get 2 regional coordinators for Cuyahoga County. And even, you know, who could dip into Geauga County as well. The Summit Portage Stark area and the Lorain County area. So the other positions we're looking for is just our Keystone workshop coordinator and team. Any volunteers, if you know about a certain topic and want to teach something like invasive removal, winter sowing, you know, native plant 101, or if you really like making PowerPoints, or you know, have that graphic eye and you want to help out in creating the content, you know, we're always looking for volunteers for that aspect. So we'll be doing that throughout the next few months as well. It's more of the same. Okay. So our upcoming events this weekend, we have a social in Summit County. It's actually at my house to do rock painting. So I'm pretty excited. We had the idea, either you can paint native plants and flowers, or if you plant something, you can always, I think a lot of times people do this for like their vegetable garden or herb garden, is they do like the plant markers. So they'll write what, you know, they'll paint what the name of the plant is, and then that way you can remember what it is. So be as creative as your heart desires. Registration is required, so that way we can send you all the detailed information of where to be. Again, that's this Sunday from 1 to 4. We'll have snacks. We are going to have a pot up and potluck social and education event December 8th. It's going to be at Ray Stewart's house in Lorain County. So basically you can learn how to easily transfer native plants to larger pots while they're dormant. So it's kind of like this hands-on, get your hands dirty, but then also bring a snack and chat about all things native plants. This slide should have been the day before, so I apologize. We're backing up in time here. December 7th, we're gonna have a winter family fun day at the Owenslager Nature Center in Wadsworth. That's in Medina County, where the Medina County Parks District nature my mind just blanked. Nature centers. So they're gonna obviously family friendly means bring your kids, bring your grandkids, bring your neighbors' kids, your nieces and nephews. There's gonna be nature crafts, coloring, making ornaments, butterfly cornhole, which sounds pretty awesome to me, and a scavenger hunt. So and probably also bonus points if you come dressed as a butterfly. If anyone has any leftover Halloween costumes, I saw quite a few butterflies out for trick-or-treat this past year. So be on the lookout for that. For more information, we have our annual holiday celebration meeting. That is going to be the best time. So everyone on this call should register and come celebrate with us for a job well done in 2024. We're going to talk about what we did. We're going to kind of do not a surprise, a reveal of our 2025 goals and what we wish to accomplish next year. As well as we're going to have, which I think this is on the next slide. Yeah. We're going to have Dr. Randy Mitchell, who's a biology professor at the University of Akron, give a presentation on native Ohio bumblebees. We're going to be making ornaments. It's at Forest City Brewery. It's going to be a cash bar, but there's going to be really good beer. If you haven't had Forest City beer before, it's top notch. Celebrate, socialize. It's always great to be together in one room and not just looking at each other over the screen. So I'm really excited about this event and to just see everybody and celebrate in person. That's going to be Tuesday, December 10th up in Ohio City. So I hope you can join us. We're going to be tabling at the Winter Solstice Luminary Walk and Holiday Market. That's going to be at the Nature Center at Shaker Lakes. That is December 13th in the evening. They're going to have all sorts of vendors for the holiday market. I'm not entirely sure of the entire scope of the program, but we're going to be there to hang out and talk about wild ones and native plants and have some games and probably some seeds to pass out. And 'tis the season. We're starting our winter sowing gauntlet here at Greater Cleveland Wild Ones, starting with Thursday, January 16th, in Medina. No, not in Medina, in Stark County with Stark Parks. This is registration required. You can either hit that QR code there or Stark Parks on their website. They have you can go to their events and programs and scroll down until you find this native seed winter sowing and click on that and register. It is free to register. You just have to register because I think the space is limited. So if you're a Summit Stark resident, this one's for you guys. Yes, Diane.
I think this is our first event in Stark County. So way to go, Wild Ones. Great.
Yes.
Opinion.
That's a good point. Thank you. We have another one. This is the Medina one. Again at the Owenslager Nature Center, registration will be required. It is not up yet, but it will be there. But Medina County Parks has the same, it'll be the same. You go in to their programs and click on that. So this one will be Sunday, January 19th from 2 to 4. All right, we made it. We made it to the end. So discussion time. Does anybody know what native plant or native plant adjacent books are on your holiday wish list? And I will say, whatever everybody shares, I request that it gets added to the chat with an author, so that way we can all run and put it on our wish list as well. Does anybody want to start? Should I start? I gotta look up who the author is.
I have one real quick.
Yes,
The
Allison.
service. I want to read. I actually got it from the library. The Service Berry by Robin Walt Kimmerer. Yeah, new one out, I think.
So you stole mine, but that's fine. Yes, so it's the same author that wrote Braiding Sweetgrass, and she just came out with her second book, and it's been a long time between those books, and I'm not sure if she's written anything in between there. There was a local bookstore, I want to say it was in like Wisconsin or something, somewhere not close to here. And it popped up in my Facebook events as like, oh, we're doing this really cool, like book release and like book party. And I was like, oh, I gotta go. And I look and I'm like, this is 2 states away. It was far away. I'm like, I want a bookstore around here to do a book release of that book. So same.
Be
Did
cool.
you get it from the library yet?
Yeah, I was on the list and it just came through, so I've got to pick it up tomorrow.
Okay. All right. Are you gonna start reading it tomorrow?
Yes. I'm like that.
All right. You gotta let us know how it is.
Sure.
Give us some thumbs up, thumbs down.
Yeah, I've read her other ones. They're good too, so big
Yeah.
fan.
Good. Anybody else?
I put one in the chat. I don't know if anyone has any ideas about that one, but I heard it was good. And then actually I have a request since some of you know I'm going to be a grandma next year. So I was looking for books, like baby books. And so
Ooh.
I looked at like Where the Wild Things Are and The Hungry Little Caterpillar. And so far they're not really getting it for me. I need them to be a little bit more realistic and accurate. Anyway, if anyone has any ideas, chat me up.
So I know there's a Dr. Seuss one. It's not necessarily native, but it's all about trees, and it's 50 trees you can name. And it just goes through like, the whole shtick is by the time you end up reading the book, you'll know 50 trees. But it does
Okay.
give like good history. Like it talks about like ginkgos and cycads and like, oh, these were around when the dinosaurs were here. And of course it rhymes. It's thing one and thing two go through all the
Oh, okay.
trees.
Cool.
That's a good one.
Okay, thank you.
Not all native, but
It's okay.
it's fun.
Thank you.
I've not heard of, I'm gonna look up that butterfly gardening one. Oh, I don't recognize that cover. Does anybody else? Chris, do you have anything on your book wish list?
It's kind of lame because I'm the plant ecologist here, but I don't really read about plants a lot. I
That's
really
okay.
kind of read more about like rewilding and like nature restoration and stuff.
That
So
counts.
yeah, so there's one actually, there was one quote in that presentation I did by a book I love. I'm probably going to reread. It's called The Once and Future World. And it's just kind of about kind of how things are messed up, but it's kind of hopeful in a weird way too. But I just really liked it.
The Once and Future.
Yeah.
The cover of it looks familiar. Like I think I've seen that before.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. There's a lot of
Yeah.
really interesting facts in there just about how things have changed and how, again, how we just don't even know like the world we live in. Even a lot of the scientists, they just don't know like what it used to be and what it could be, you know?
Yeah. I like
So,
books like that.
so that's one definitely I'm gonna be rereading over Christmas break or whatever.
Yeah. I like it. Jane, what about you? Do you have anything that you're eyeing up?
There is one, but I can't think of the name or the author. It's in my notes somewhere. If I think of it, I'll throw it out there sometime.
What's it about?
It's about plants, native
Okay.
plants.
Okay.
And I think it was introduced at an Audubon. Remember we went to that Audubon outing in August or what? It was one of
Yeah.
the that Jane
Mhm.
mentioned.
Elliot?
Jane, yeah. So, but I can't remember that. It's in my notes in that folder. So
Antonia, what about you? I'm just calling everybody out.
Oh gosh, I don't have one.
No.
No, there was a really interesting book that the presenter at the Northeast Ohio Native Plant Society meeting talked about. It's called The Lives of Lichens.
Hmm.
It is, I guess it's from a series of books that are all about uh different interesting um groups of life, and there's one that's on lichens, and I've always just thought that those are very interesting assemblages of creatures. So I guess it goes like
Cool.
into all the biology, the symbiosis, and lots of cool pictures.
I just Googled it and the photograph on the cover looks amazing. And I will say that the Princeton University Press looks like they sell it and they do sales throughout the year that are amazing.
Oh,
So maybe that might be something to keep an eye on.
very good to know. I'll throw it in
I
the chat.
bought way too many books from them. I'm not even gonna try and here. That's very cool. It looked like there was a lives of fungi as well.
Yeah, yeah. I think they have one on like cephalopods and
The
other interesting.
photography on both the covers looks amazing.
Mhm.
That's very cool.
Hmm.
Oh, there's a spiders. Oh my gosh, there really is like
Yeah, yeah.
that's very cool.
Hmm.
Ooh, Allison, you put another one.
Yeah. Sorry, I get to listen to a lot of good ones at work. So I've got we're leaf blowing all day long. So I have these headphones in, I'm listening to stuff. But Under a Wild Sky is about Audubon. It's really kind of interesting to hear like the early history of the naturalists in the US. So, but I recommend audiobook. It seems kind of long. I bet it's a very big book.
That's good. That's cool. Yeah, I like kind of those history, like how something was formed, topics as well. So that's good. All right. Anybody else have anything to add? We'll wrap things up. No? Okay.
Thanksgiving
Cool.
to everyone.
Oh yes, happy Thanksgiving to everybody. And we will not have our regular chapter meeting like this in December because we will have our chapter holiday celebration annual meeting in December on the 10th. So in this setting, we won't see you again until January. So yeah, have a great all the holidays until and after 2025. So thanks for coming tonight, and thanks, Chris, again. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Chris.
Thanks, everybody.